so that we can post this for everyone who isn't able to hop on the call right now. But we're gonna go over just a high-level view of Choice Humanitarian for those who aren't familiar with the organization. And then we're gonna get right into the specifics of the trip, the country, the team, the project work, and what that looks like, and then leave a lot of time to just go over questions on packing. And most importantly, raise your hand if any of you have been on an international humanitarian type trip. So I think there's a few, right? Congratulations for going on another one. that's encouraging. Did you go with Choice Humanitarian? With Vivian. Okay, great. So yeah, big trip, big group, big endeavor. You guys are very familiar then with what we're going to talk about today, which is what makes this type of trip different than normal travel. And there's a couple reasons, and those reasons are what make them something that you remember sometimes differently than normal travel. So with that, okay, so quick introductions about myself. I unfortunately am not going to be on your trip, so we don't need to spend too much time talking about me. But my name is Jordan. You may see emails coming from me. I work at Choice Humanitarian as the Director of Expeditions for all of our trips. And so I'll talk about it in a minute, work in a lot of countries. And one of the things that I'm excited about, particularly with you guys, is that this is the first formal expedition with Peru. Peru's a new country for us. And so it's been a country that I've loved getting involved with. I've been at Choice now 8 months. Before that, I've worked down at Qualtrics down the street for quite a while. Before that, international development and economics. So it's a community I've been a big fan of. I've been leading trips for years with Choice, mostly to Bolivia and Mexico. The leaders on this trip, I've had the good fortune to know both of them at a pretty personal level. Tyler and I, when I first joined Choice in this capacity, we co-led a trip to Guatemala. I was in December. And Tyler, not only is he a phenomenal kind of cultural interpreter and speaks Spanish extremely fluently. Actually thought you were Latino. That's true. I've got a little Latino.
I have a Latino person.
Yeah, but uniquely, Tyler had actually lived and worked leading expeditions for a different organization in Piura, Peru, years before. And so when Choice adopted through a merger these two different countries, their operations and teams, and we started to look at who the best leadership would be for what essentially is our first formal expedition to that area with our in-country team, Tyler was hands down who we had to get, and I've been pestering Tyler for a very long time to make this trip work with his schedule. And so just really, really glad to have Tyler, and he's a phenomenal person to lead a trip with as well. So you guys are in great hands. And then Karina has been to Nepal with some of you actually, and then has worked at Choice on the expedition coordination side for the last 4 or 5 months and been very involved with Choice leadership. Both of them have a really good relationship with Oscar, who's the in-country director, which isn't always the case, particularly in the new country. And so the team that you guys are stepping into is really strong, is really tight, and you're going to have a lot of fun. And it's kind of depressing when I'm involved with trips in the planning side and then don't get to go, like me and old Damien here. But I'll let them maybe just introduce themselves in a little bit more detail on kind of how they got involved with Choice, I guess.
Ladies first.
Okay. Oh.
No, yeah, but we're still on.
Okay. Well, I got involved with Choice as a participant in the Nepal trip with Vivian at that time. And I just fell in love with Choice, doing a couple of things here and there. And then last year in December, actually, I reached out to Leah, who's the CEO, and I just wanted to get involved in a deeper level. And so I was this man's assistant, Jordan's assistant for a while. So, and now I'm very, very excited to be involved in our expedition to Peru. I love to serve. I think I love to travel. And so those two just merge. And I just love the culture of that And the purpose of Choice Humanitarian, that we're not doing giving a handout, we're actually helping the community become self-sufficient. And I think that the project that we have right now not only will make a big impact on that particular home, but actually in their lives in the long run and in their health. And so what we're going to be doing is not just going to Peru and sightsee, but we're actually going to make a huge impact on these people's health and their daily lives, and hopefully for generations to come. So I'm very excited for that.
Yep. So I'm Tyler Wolstenhume, and so I actually worked with Jordan at Qualtrics, even though we actually didn't know that we worked with each other before he left. But I actually do the Latin America consulting, so I'm over the Latin America market down in Qualtrics, and so I'm speaking Spanish all day. So that's been extremely helpful when I've been managing and leading expeditions. As Jordan mentioned, I used to lead humanitarian expeditions for a company called Eagle Condor. And so this will be my 4th expedition to Peru. I used to live in Piura and Chiclayo and Cusco as well. So I know the area extremely well. So if you have any questions about different things, I can definitely help you out in that regard. I love to, same thing with Karina, is to travel, and I'm very well traveled, but I love going back to this area because of the people. They're just extremely great, and happy to serve in that area. Anything else?
I'm going to add something else, just
Okay.
so you realize, if you go on Facebook and scour Tyler's Facebook page, or whatever it's called, you'll find alarming photos of him mountain biking over like 30-foot gaps and paragliding, which I think is my only paragliding friend. So,
I do like to push the envelope.
and he
so
still shows up.
if you see a paraglider over Machu Picchu,
So I mentioned Oscar. Many of you probably don't have context for who he is and who the team is. Choice and expeditions fit into a much bigger program, and each program in all of our countries is supported by an in-country team. So while Tyler and Karina are going to be your on-the-ground trip leaders, working to make sure everything is smooth and coordinated and the dynamics and the projects are all going well, they're only able to do that because there's a lot of preparation and ongoing work that's taking place with a whole team. They joined officially Choice back in about a year ago. They've been operating under a different nonprofit organization focused on agricultural development in Peru for a very long time. Oscar, you might have seen in Facebook, he had a little BYU shirt. He is not from Utah by any means, he's from Peru, but he did do a study stint here in Utah, and that's actually how he ended up getting connected to Feed the World. And so he speaks great English, and he's a very, very enthusiastic leader in country. And so I put their names and their faces up there, not so that you remember specifically who they are, but so you kind of get the context already that there's a whole team that is going to become a part of this expedition. And they're very excited because this is their first expedition. They're a very professional team, and so they take it very seriously. And I'll just kind of explain some context for how expeditions just fit into it, into Choice. I won't spend too much time on this. But Choice has been around for well over 30 years, and it's first and foremost an international development organization that focuses on community leadership and building community leadership through training community members to prioritize and design and execute their own projects, okay? And so that principle means that in every country in which we operate, which are 7 countries, we have a presence historically in Vietnam, not currently, but we have an in-country team like Oscar and his team, 5 to 12 people who are agronomists, economists, development experts, health facilitators, project managers, local and native to every country that they're in. So whether it's Piura, Peru, or Nepal, and Vishnu and his team, if you remember them, right? We only operate with local native leaders who've come from the communities in which they operate. And they're executing a model that is very community driven, which is they work with communities who have identified or expressed a commitment to change, who are then working on leadership capacity to do what is super hard. They're community organizing a lot of people and stakeholders around their needs, a lot of competing interests and needs within a community, and they're teaching and training them to identify those needs, leverage resources. So this expedition is not only partially funding a lot of projects, but the community itself is putting in its own time, sweat equity, and sometimes actual resources whether material or financial, to make a project happen. And so we don't operate when communities are not in that cycle. And that is, just for context, going on in all of our countries at any given point between 20 to 30 communities in a country at a time. Only a very small fraction of those communities will interact in any way with what is an expedition, right? Expeditions really come in on this celebration evaluation phase, and they do a few things that are kind of integral to how CHOICE is operated. One, they're for sure a fundraiser. So about half of the expedition fee is going towards project budget for this specific project, and all the work that goes on before, during our work, and long after. And that's what makes it sustainable, right? It isn't about just showing up and leaving, but rather supporting a community. And then there's the whole other side of the intercultural exchange that happens when two very different cultures rally around some common goals, work together, learn together, play together. That leaves a whole network of communities very, very motivated to continue to work with the people who they need to work with, which is the in-country team, right? And so one of the things that I'll throw out to you guys is this is a really important opportunity for both the CHOICE team in Peru and the network of communities that this will kind of have touch points with, because it's their first. And so it means they're going to really monitor their future relationship based off of this interaction. And that's exciting because in most instances, it's a real catalyst.
Can I add something here?
Yeah.
Jordan? So it's kind of cool. I've been in communities where it's the first trip, and I've been in communities where it's like one of the last trips or maybe several trips down the line. And I think the newness wears off as you visit communities more frequently. And so I think it would be awesome to actually go down and meet the people, because this will be new for them. And I think it will be exciting. It will add to kind of the, I don't know, specialness.
Yeah, and one thing I would add that is distinct with CHOICE is that typically communities will not have expeditions twice. Because we have such large volume of projects and communities that we're working with, we do believe that there's a very fine line to empower a community and collaborate and learn from one another, but then step out of the picture and let that community feel like it's running the show, because they are. And that's what creates kind of self-developing communities. And nothing, that said though, I mean, yeah, nothing is more exciting than being the first group to, because this will be a broad network of communities, and this will be one touch point that will be very contagious in areas. So I'll kind of tee it off here to Tyler. I mentioned the differences about a normal trip and an expedition, and that kind of set the tone for some of that.
Yeah, one of the things that I've noticed going into these things is, like Jordan said, you have a fusion of cultures. You have, the American way of life, and you have the Peruvian way of life, and there's oftentimes some differences. So there's a few things that we know and a few things that we don't know about each expedition, and oftentimes this requires patience on their end, patience on our end. So we want to talk about those, bring those out in the open, and discuss what is known. A couple of those things are the trip itinerary. We have that all laid out extremely well. The in-country directors, they have helped generate that. They know what's going on. They're informed, and they have the resources in place to make sure that itinerary flows smoothly. If it doesn't, that's kind of where the unknown comes into play, which we'll talk about here in a second. We know our team. We know that there's going to be great food. Hopefully, it'll be safe, and we'll have no
Hopefully
problem.
it will be safe.
No.
It will be safe.
No, it will
Actually,
be.
I'm not sure there is food.
Yeah, no food. Sorry. No, yeah, definitely great food. We prepare the food from very, very safe sources, and it's prepared in a way that it would meet our standards as Americans. Project goals, we know those. We have those. We know our intentions. We know we're going to be staying. As well as, obviously, we'll talk about safety and what things to keep in mind. We do have a list of items that we've prepared for you as general guidelines to what to pack and what not to pack, and what you need and what you don't need. And then also, we desire to help you. Karina and I will work together to make sure that you have what you need, make sure you're comfortable, etc. So the unknowns are always the fun ones. And when I travel, I actually travel a little bit differently than most people. I actually kind of seek out the unknowns, not necessarily with other people, but just in my, I'm not setting this up very well, but I'm just saying, I think every expedition needs an element of surprise and oftentimes unknowns to make it interesting and also to add to the breadth of the experience, right? And so there are going to be unknowns. There are going to be things that will make us uncomfortable or awkward. And I think that's partly a good thing. For example, travel delays. I've been in places where there's been a strike, for a bus or something like that. And so there's no buses available, or if they blockaded this area. I'm not saying that's going to happen here, but these are some things that sometimes come up and sometimes they can be fun. And, we have a party on the bus while you're waiting, or something like that. I'm just making this up. The village dynamic, they're receiving CHOICE for the first time. We're going into this village. Some of us aren't familiar with this culture. We don't know how they're going to react, or if they're going to be, shy or, extremely friendly. These are some of the things that we're going to have to roll with. Personal health, sometimes, even though the food is prepared in a safe manner, it just doesn't sit well with one of our bodies. That might happen, and we need to roll with it. Project pace and results. For me, this is a big one, and maybe Karina can chime in on this one too, is that oftentimes we are in these nice buildings. We're in, a quarterly, sales type of mentality where you have to get things done by a certain time, and we're used to the efficiency and, resources of the American market, whereas down there they don't have those sorts of things. And so we have to really think about, okay, did we get done what we needed to get done? If not, is that okay? Do we need to re-examine what we can do tomorrow? And if we don't get something done, is that still good? And if it's good for us, maybe we can consider what we can do better next time. But I think a lot of it is just, feel good in what we're doing, even though the pace not be what we're used to here in the United States. I don't know if you add to that, Amy? Okay.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the project pace and the results really deals a lot with the schedule. We do have a daily schedule, and so if we're respectful with that, the more we're going to be able to accomplish versus just waiting for 20, 30 minutes for somebody to actually get out of bed and things like that. So I feel that if we are respectful to the schedule, we're going to be able to accomplish more of the reason why we're actually going to Peru, which is to do this humanitarian service. And hopefully that way the results will be, the best possible.
And if there's one thing that this polarity here is meant to capture, it's that right now, start to identify your expectations and start to acknowledge that with this type of experience, there will be expectations that are reasonable, like being secure and knowing what's happening. But there will be expectations, whether cultural sensitivities, comfort, heat, there's a lot of factors that we simply can't predict for, but we can do our best as leaders to manage or mitigate. So the idea is starting now, start to roll with the punches of change and fluidity, which I think as a fast-paced growing company, you are all very familiar with, I'm sure. So Tyler, just kind of give some context for where we're going. And
yeah, so Piura is in the northern part of Peru. Piura is actually lower elevation, and it's quite warm there. It's near the equator, near Ecuador. However, we will be flying into Lima and then into Piura, and then we'll be taking some transportation from Piura, and we're going to be going towards the east and actually going into a higher elevation zone. And my understanding is that the temperatures are going to be about 50 to 70 degrees, which is actually quite nice for being a very warmer area of Peru. So definitely the elevation helps it keep it cool. So prepare for those type of temperatures when you guys are packing your clothing and so forth. And so here we have the updated itinerary. So my understanding is that we're flying out on a Friday. I will actually be flying with you. Karina will be leaving earlier or later? Earlier, that's right, okay. So she'll be leaving earlier, but I will actually be on the airplane with you guys. meeting at the airport and, getting you through customs and all that kind of stuff when you get to Peru.
I'll be your welcoming party.
Yep, she'll be there. So day one, we'll be traveling and arriving in Piura. And so we'll basically start the evening by arriving at the hotel. We usually have a really nice dinner, get to know you session. And then we also have like an orientation where we'll discuss a few things that are forthcoming in the day. Sunday, what we do is we have breakfast served at the hotel. We will be leaving Piura from the hotel and then be traveling several hours to the communities. And we'll have different stops along the way for lunch and waters on the bus, etc.
And if I can, I'm going to jump in one thing here that everyone's going to need to be prepared for. That Friday is going to be a super long day because you're going to be leaving in the morning, everyone, from some destination. Mostly meeting up in LA, which will be fun because everyone's going to pretty much convene from all the different regions. The beautiful LAX airport, which is so fun.
Okay.
And then you're going to have a long flight that you're going to get in really late to Lima. I think it gets in around midnight, maybe 2 a.m., somewhere in between there. So we're going to be doing customs and all that fun stuff. And how that's going to work is when you get into the Lima airport, because it's so late, we've got such an early flight the next morning out of the same airport, and you're going to kind of be going out there. You're going to find a little kind of area to make a little encampment and try and get some sleep, because then we're luckily catching the first flight out that morning. And so you'll be in Piura Saturday morning pretty early, around 9 to 10, which is great. So you'll be in the hotel. So there's going to be a few hours of getting checked in, rest, regrouping on that first Saturday, and some time to explore Piura, which will be nice.
It's an hour right now.
Just 1 hour?
Just 1 hour right now. Usually.
Yeah.
No, it's an hour ahead. It's an hour ahead. It's an hour ahead.
Yeah, not very much.
Yep. So one of the things that I recommend, I used to be horrible at sleeping on airplanes, still kind of am, but one of the things that have helped me is earplugs. I like to take earplugs on the airplane. And then also if you have like one of those sleeping masks, those actually work really well. And an Ambien, whatever drugs you might want to do that. But yeah, if you can get some sleep on the airplane on the way down, that would be extremely helpful as well. So that way the early morning doesn't come so early. So then when we get into the community, we'll have breakfast in the village, and then we'll also start the projects basically. And
yeah, I mean, you'll be getting into the community. Sunday will be a fun but long day with a couple stints of drives. It'll be really beautiful. The morning will be about 4 hours from Piura to a primary base called Frias. You can Google Frias. I think we've got it.
which means cold.
Yes.
Obviously.
So this little stretch here is about 4 hours. Okay, so you'll have some lunch here in Frias, and then it's another 2 hours, not very far, but it is out of the bus and into some 4x4s for about another 2 hour and a half to 2.5, kind of a range depending on rain, depending on how you're all doing in the 4x4s, and to get to the community. So it'll be a kind of a Sunday arrival at night for that.
Great. Great. And so then we have a few days of doing projects. I believe that we're going to be building some stoves, which we did in Guatemala. They're going to be a different style of stove using adobe bricks that are basically baked in the sun, is my understanding, and a little bit different than what we had. We used cement blocks, but yeah, a little bit different, but it's going to be kind of interesting in how they do it.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in just a minute here.
Great. And then on Thursday, looks like we will have basically a farewell. Generally, the community is some sort of farewell for us. We say our goodbyes, maybe play a soccer game or 6, depending on how many kids want to play with us. And that's one thing too that I'm excited about, is playing soccer in the communities, and it's incredible. I don't know what the elevation is per se, but I mean, these kids can run like we can at like 10,000 feet. And this is like, that's like at the top of Snowbird, like running around playing a soccer game in the elevation. So that's always a fun one to get your lungs up to speed. So, and then Friday, that's when we depart from Piura and we fly to Cusco, which is basically the touristy part of our expedition, which is fantastic. I love going back to Machu Picchu, and we'll do some tours of ruins, and we'll see the city, and have a great time there. So.
And Friday, I'll just add some context here. So Thursday is going to be they're going back that same route, right? Getting back into Piura, same hotel that you'll land in. Early in the morning on Friday, that flight to Cusco. And when we arrive in Cusco, we're meeting up with a partner who is facilitating the tour component of Cusco, the trek into Machu Picchu, which you can kind of see here, and those subsequent days. They're a great partner. They've worked a lot actually with organizations here in Utah, and that's how we got to know them. And so you'll be kind of picking up and meeting a new, some new leaders. Although Tyler and Karina are still definitely going to be a part of all of those transport points. But there's going to be a shift, right? We're coming straight out of the community, and we're kind of putting on a little bit more of an explore and relax, and kind of, anyone been to Cusco, Machu Picchu? No.
So it's kind of interesting. Cusco is like, the elevation there is 10,000 feet. So it's like at nighttime, it's generally cooler. I would say maybe 50 degrees sometimes. And so, light jacket or even a heavier jacket sometimes might be appropriate. But then during the day, the sun is so direct that it's kind of warm there. So it's kind of an interesting kind of, not what I was used to. You go up to Snowbird, it's super cold, and then you come down the valley, it's super warm. It's the reverse there, kind of. So what was I going to say about Cusco? Or something else I was going to say. It's one of the most enchanting cities. It's cobblestone. There's some pretty cool things that are there. And some of the accommodations that we have in Piura are really nice. So coming back from the village, going to Piura, like that night in the hotel is actually kind of yes, very comforting. So that's good. Yeah.
No, it is. Everyone complains when they arrive. They're like, ugh. And then coming back, it's like they've arrived at like I see it every trip. I see the murmurings when they arrive, like, okay. And Wi-Fi signal's not strong, and etc. And then when they're coming back, it's like there was a hot drop of water. And they're
what are you saying?
So.
Hotel. Where are you gonna stay?
And they're always great hotels. That's just when you travel internationally. We're used to a different standard, but they're all great spaces. And the time in Cusco is Aguas Calientes, Machu Picchu is probably one of the most diverse 3 days I feel like in South America you can possibly experience. We're going to be on, literally in 2 days, you will have been on, within 3 days, you will have been on 4x4s, buses, planes, trains, and a ton of hiking.
Yeah.
All of that in 3 days' time. And if you haven't had a chance to dive into Cusco, Machu Picchu, for context, I mean, it's going to be just a really, really
and there's one phrase that I can prepare you for. It would be no gracias, because they're very, very forthright with their selling techniques. So, but we will be going to the markets, and that'll be extremely fun.
Yeah.
So you can buy all sorts of fun things and paintings, and it's just, markets is probably one of my favorite parts of the trip. Feel free to bring cash and things like that, and plenty of space in your suitcase for things coming home.
Great. You want to dive into this, or?
Yeah, so I know we touched upon this a little bit. I am extremely happy that we're doing stoves again, because I just think it's such a great initiative. A lot of what happens is we have these mothers and children oftentimes in the home cooking, because a lot of these homes still use wood to cook their meals. They don't have gas, they don't have electricity, etc. So they use wood that they gather, and they use that to basically make all of their meals. And so you can imagine having smoke in their home, gets into their lungs. They tend to have problems later on in life. They don't live very long due to different complications, things like that. So the idea is to build a stove where the primary cook in the home can have the stove and also the smoke leave the home. So it significantly reduces health risks for both children and the father and the mother, who tends to do most of the cooking. And so we found that this is one of the ways, most cost-effective ways to have the greatest amount of benefit for the health of the villagers. And so, as you can see, there is a design of some of the stoves that we've created in the past for other villages in Guatemala and such, where you have still a place where they cook using wood because that's their main fuel source, but then they actually have, stove places for the pots on the top, and then they have the chimney in the rear, and then a way for them to be able to take out the ashes and deposit them, somewhere else. So,
just a little context on the community here. As I mentioned, CHOICE has been working, or not CHOICE, Oscar and his team under Feed the World have been working in this area for a very long time. And this is a network of communities that's been very active in their work, mostly on rural family agricultural training and education. So think kind of family farms, people growing and producing and consuming kind of their own food, et cetera. And so this is one of the first phases of kind of what would be like an infrastructure project. And so it's in a big community. This is Meseta Andina, which is about 2 hours outside of the larger area. And then in that community, there's a lot of little networks of villages. And this village is the one you see right here. And that's the one we'll be spending time in. Pretty big network of communities, but all CHOICE projects kind of work through a very community-driven, formalized process of families who've stepped up, put in resources, and so that's how they get prioritized. So this project, you'll see it's a lot of work, and we're working on all the phases of 17 stoves. So
let me pause here real quick, Jordan. I know we'll have time for questions at the end, but is there any comments or thoughts or immediate questions that you have at this point? I know we've been talking quite a bit, so. I have $5 for the first question. Great. Yeah, I'm definitely all ears to your thoughts and questions as they come. So feel free to.
Here's just some more kind of images about the different types of phases that go in. This just gives some context for the type of work: digging, prep work, hauling, clearing. You can see some.
Are these from some of our Guatemala?
Yes.
Ones? Yeah. So there's, and that's maybe another component that's unknown is the hardness of the dirt. Sometimes because we do need to build out the trench to put in the blocks and so forth. So I mean, you could have a family that has a piece of dirt and land that's very clear. You could have something that's extremely rocky. So you might have to consider that as one of the hardships of putting in the stove, things like that. So oftentimes we have different tools or different people that have different skills that can remove rocks and things like that. So it's always a fun time to do that. So
cool, and we'll let Karina hop in a little bit and just add some context. You saw in the itinerary, right? There's 4 days or so where we're in the community, just kind of walking through what logistically does that look like.
I'm gonna do what?
Yeah, just kind of walk it.
Just like the daily life, right?
Yep.
So basically we're gonna have a schedule. I mean, we're gonna let you know the night before how the next day is gonna look like, and all we ask is to be mindful of those times because it's a group effort in order for us to be able to accomplish what we're going to. Like the stoves and the projects, and so in the morning we're gonna wake up, have breakfast. Breakfast is they usually do cater to the American taste as well as the local food. So it's gonna be simple but plentiful. You're welcome to bring snacks from home. You're doing some candy bars or something like that. You can. Between breakfast, lunch, and dinner, there are going to be snacks provided in between from CHOICE, but you're always welcome to bring your favorite.
I'm going to recommend Choco Sodas. They're like chocolate covered soda crackers. They are amazing. I'm going to get 10 pounds.
All right. The food in Peru is really actually very delicious. It's not very extreme. It's not. I don't foresee it being super spicy either.
No, it's generally not spicy. However, Peruvian food is one of my most favorite foods of all the countries I've been to.
Yeah, so I think you'll be happy with the food. Also, the sleeping quarters, we're going to have a room where we all pretty much going to be, like if you see in the bottom right corner, it's going to be, you know, pretty much communal sleeping quarters. So we just, it's going to be, did we decide how we're going to separate that yet?
Yeah, so there's
going to be couples. And
there's typically two ways that will go about. Some of that is up to the group's discretion, kind of with the leaders to determine the layout. We know the space. It's in a community center that the community has offered up that's got a couple spaces in it and a close access to bathroom, which you'll see right there.
We do have
Those are actual photos of the outhouse and the toilet. They did make a note when they sent me that photo to say that is mud from the children. Just for clarification, that is mud from the school kids. But those, so yeah, so there's good facilities. But what that'll look like is,
Jordan, I think it's snores and non-snores.
Yeah, snores. There's a lot of ways this can be divided up.
Earplugs for the night would be great. Headphones.
But generally, it's either kind of men, and sometimes when you're all in the same area, it's like, look, everyone's got a mat. They got your sleeping bag, your bag kind of right next to you, and that's just half the fun as you're all just lined up. But if it makes better sense to have smaller kind of sections, we can do couples and mix it all up. But we pretty much find that is a pretty organic plan. Once you arrive, everyone gets a sense of the space and comes up with a plan on how to best accommodate that.
Just to be aware and be flexible that maybe your personal space is going to be a little bit invaded, but that's okay. We're going to be friends. Everything's cool. And then with the toilet situation, especially for like women, it's a little bit more. And so it doesn't necessarily flush, like we're going to have like a bucket, I believe, that we're just going to be able to use that to flush it with. So just be prepared with that. And I feel lucky that we're actually going to have a toilet, because when we went to the fall, it wasn't necessarily as modern. So this is actually going to be okay. We actually we're going to have places that we can go ahead and shower, and they're also, again, they're not going to be bathrooms, but there's going to be like metal and plastic structures, but again, it's not. We're going to have it's kind of like bucket showers too. So
not gonna lie, most people don't shower on expeditions. Just gonna throw it out there. There's always an option. It's usually cold and uncomfortable, and everyone's like, I'm good.
Right.
But
it's available.
Yeah, it is available.
You decide to. And so, do we want to go to the next slide?
You know, we do want to go to the next slide, but I have to apologize here because I forgot one of the most important introductions of this trip, which is Ben from EMT Utah. Some of you have probably been wondering, who's Ben? They haven't introduced him, and he's not working for us. CHOICE Humanitarian has a partnership with EMT Utah, which is a network of EMT volunteers, think first responders, paramedics, etc. And through that partnership, they place certified EMTs on CHOICE Humanitarian expeditions. And it's a newer relationship, and so as we've been building that out, don't always know which trips it will line up for to have a volunteer. And Ben caught wind of this trip and was kind of interviewed and selected through the EMTs at EMT Utah, and we just found out yesterday. So I'll let Ben maybe introduce himself just a little bit.
I've done firefighting. I've done basic EMT. I'm an advanced EMT currently. I love helping people, and I got wind of this. I thought it'd be an awesome experience to do it.
And let me add a little context for the role that the EMT, Ben, in this instance, will play on the trip. Not only is Ben coming with all the expertise you would expect someone to have when you call 911, but he's also coming with a full jump kit of everything that would be used to treat your basic medical and basic trauma up to kind of intermediate issues in order to, not that we have accidents abroad, but things come up. And so Ben's going to be there to be that resource. And what that looks like is when you have questions, concerns, or minor accidents, that you really keep an open dialogue with both your leaders also with Ben to build that relationship, because the name of the game is really twofold, as we've seen with the EMTs on this trip. One is pestering people to be mindful about the preventative steps of eating well, resting well, drinking well, washing your hands, etc. But also, I mean, on our most recent one, I don't know if Tyson told you, putting people out of fire. We had a wonderful woman. I wish I had the photo. I should really use this, because this is the only story I'm going to show you. This was in Nepal, and they were inaugurating a schoolhouse, and through that, all the volunteers receive a little diploma, and there were these beautiful scarves, and they bow down to receive the blessing, and then they come up to take a photo. And in her photo is her holding her certificate and smiling, like, and her scarf in flames up to here. I really am not exaggerating. And she doesn't yet know that they're on fire. Seconds after that photo is taken, Tyson, the EMT volunteer, burst out of a crowd of like 400 people and was on it and solved it. So there is a range of things that...
How did she catch on fire?
When she bowed down to receive her blessing, her scarf fell in the candles.
In the candles.
And literally stood up, took the photo, and then everyone was like, she's on fire. I need to get the photo, and I think it needs to be in every orientation. So...
And be safe, and sometimes we tend to goof off a little bit, and we can get some injuries like stumble assaults or jumping, from trees and things like that. Just we are out there, but let's just keep it calm, and let's not inflict like injury on our